Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Radha Kund Bihari Radhe Radha Kund Bihari Radha Kund Bihari Radhe Radha Kund Bihari Radha Kund Bihari Radhe Radha Kund Bihari Radha Kund Bihari Radhe Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Mai Subhaja Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Mai Subhaja Jaya Srinath Ji Jaya Bala Gopal Jaya Srinath Ji Jaya Ji Govardhan Jaya Srinath Ji Jaya Bala Gopal Jaya Srinath Ji Jaya Ji Govardhan Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Gurudeva 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 Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jai Hari Nam Sankirtana ki Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya 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 Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadartikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sahajajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Haridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa sindhubhaiva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, welcome. It's good to be back, all of you, after a little excursion. It was quite an enlightening excursion. Maybe we'll share some ideas. But today is a very exciting day because we are going to begin our discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. In some ways, we can say, well, we've been discussing for almost 2 months now, which we have. We've been covering many different topics contained within the Bhagavad Gita. And you can say that we've been establishing a foundation for us to now begin entering the study of the Bhagavad Gita and the wonderful wisdom that it contains. So, has anybody read the Bhagavad Gita or any parts of it previously? Is that some? So, some experience with the Bhagavad Gita. So, today we're going to cover in very short period basically the introduction that's been presented by Srila Prabhupada and most of the first chapter. And then in the coming weeks we're going to go from that point verse by verse forward, and some weeks we'll cover a few verses and begin to discuss this Bhagavad Gita. So today we're going to lay an overview and build on that foundation we've established to help set the right mood and framework and understanding for this Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very important discussion today.
How long is it really going to take to talk about all this?
That is a good question.
That's why I'm here.
Well, the good thing is the second chapter, if you open it, you'll see the title of the second chapter is Contents of the Gita Summarized. So in the second chapter, Krishna explains in the executive summary of the whole Bhagavad Gita. So in some ways, we'll cover all of the principal topics in just the second chapter alone, which might take us several weeks to get through. And then from there, he's going to build upon all those in detail. And in the 18th chapter, he's going to summarize again. So to go verse by verse, it could take us a few years. But each week, we'll walk away with some essence that we can start applying today. Meaning, we don't have to wait until the end. Sometimes people will say, well, I want to fully understand the Bhagavad Gita first, then I'll start. Well, the only way to understand the Bhagavad Gita actually is to begin the practice. And we'll talk a little bit about that. As Srila Prabhupada establishes in his introduction, it's very important. So Bhagavad Gita means the Song of God. And it contains 700 verses. And the Bhagavad Gita is glorified throughout our other Vedic scriptures for containing the essence of all that is to be known about how to make success in life. It is considered like the cream. If you take a cow, its essence is milk. It produces milk. And from that milk, the essence of the milk is the cream that can come from it. So similarly, of all the vast Vedic literature we have, all the Puranas, all the Vedas, all the Upanishads, and so much. If we take all of that knowledge and condense it into its core essence, it's contained within this Bhagavad Gita. And thus, Lord Shiva, in glorifying the Bhagavad Gita, in his Gita Mahatmya, says, Ekam Shastra. Ekam, one Shastra. If there is one scripture we are going to read, he says, let it be this Bhagavad Gita. Because from that, everything that we need to know expands from. So, that is why, and many other, why this Bhagavad Gita is our core scripture from which we'll read from. And we'll see that Srila Prabhupada, in giving the purports, is drawing references from all other Puranas and all other scriptures to provide further explanations to the verses that the Lord is speaking. So this is the Bhagavad Gita. A couple of things I wanted to point out before we get into the introduction, which is contained within the first 30 pages. So you notice that Srila Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is. And this is very, very important. Because we know, or if you've done some research, there are many, many translations of the Bhagavad Gita. But, unfortunately, due to various motives, the Bhagavad Gita is not always presented as it is. Meaning, what does it mean as it is? As it was spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. This is a dialogue that has taken place between two individuals. The Supreme Lord and his dear friend Arjuna. And so, this dialogue was documented. And it has been preserved, and Srila Prabhupada is translating it. And so he is presenting the original Sanskrit verses, and then the word-by-word translation, the word-by-word meaning, and then the sentence depiction. So that everything that's being presented can go traced back to the original Sanskrit verses, which is very important, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. And on page 30, presents maybe one of the most important aspects of this Bhagavad Gita, which is it explains the source of knowledge. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes. But this is where this knowledge is coming from. So, this is the Bhagavad Gita. And now we'll cover the introduction and also most of the first chapter today. So, Srila Prabhupada breaks up the introduction into 6 parts. Everything he does is very, very systematic. And I encourage all of you to read this introduction. It's very, very powerful. It's sometimes a little dense also. Maybe a little bit hard to get through. But if we read it a couple of times, it will begin to make sense. And as we progress, you can read it even more. So the first thing that Srila Prabhupada explains to us is how to approach the study of the Bhagavad Gita. And you may wonder, what the heck is Winnie the Pooh doing on this page? Well, Srila Prabhupada advises us how to approach the Bhagavad Gita. Anybody has read the introduction or has any idea how we can approach the study of our Bhagavad Gita?
Should be humble.
Humble.
Devotee.
A devotion. He says in the mood of devotion. So we can try to take an academic approach to studying the Bhagavad Gita. But the Bhagavad Gita will not be revealed within the heart by such endeavor. This is a spiritual document which requires a spiritual perspective to be able to understand. If we take a very academic approach to studying the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada compares it to trying to taste honey by licking the outside of a bottle. If you lick the outside of a bottle, will you taste any of the honey? You're so close to it. You're like a millimeter away from that honey. Yet if you licked and licked for years and years, will you ever taste the nectar of that honey? No. The same is with the Bhagavad Gita. If we try to study it with just an academic approach, a material-oriented approach, we'll not be able to draw out its true essence, the real nectar of the Bhagavad Gita. So we're going to approach it by opening the lid and pouring out the very sweet nectar of the Bhagavad Gita. And this begins with a spirit of devotion. And devotion means love. An understanding of how to find our loving relationship with the Lord. And with this spirit, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita will be revealed to us. And so, one may think, well, I'm not such a scholar. Maybe I don't understand Sanskrit. Maybe I'm not so well versed in certain things. It doesn't require this to understand the Bhagavad Gita. It requires this. As we pour our devotion into trying to understand, the Lord will reveal, as he says in the 10th chapter, the Dami Buddhi Yogam Tam. He says, I will give the intelligence to understand. And there was a great story of an illiterate Brahmana who was trying to read the Bhagavad Gita. And he could not even know if the book was to be held this way, this way, this way, or that way. And he was illiterate. And he would flip through the pages, trying to read whatever he could. And tears would flow from his eyes. And once Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to see him. Meanwhile, all the other so-called Brahmanas were making fun of him, saying, oh, this illiterate fellow, he can't even read one verse. We have memorized all these verses. We know how we can speak it backwards, forward, this, that. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my dear sir, why are you crying? He says, I don't know. My spiritual master asked me to read this Bhagavad Gita. But I'm illiterate. I cannot read. But I'm following that instruction because it must be good for me. And so I'm doing my best to read. And Chaitanya says, okay, but why are you crying? He thought maybe because he was being hurt by all the other so-called Brahmanas making fun of him. He says, I don't know, but every time I look at this cover and I see that the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Master and Controller, he has taken this position of driving, as we can see in this picture. He is the charioteer, driver for Arjuna. How much love he must have for his devotee, that he is willing to take this position. And similarly, Arjuna must be such a great friend of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that it has inspired the Lord to take this position. That when I think of this deep relationship, I shed tears of joy and love. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you have understood the full purport of the Bhagavad Gita. That is the essence. Our loving relationship with the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. That is it. So we'll study 700 verses over many years, but it's going to culminate in that. And so to taste the nectar of this Bhagavad Gita, we'll follow in the footsteps of our acharyas and approach it with this spirit of devotion. So the second thing the Lord, Srila Prabhupada explains in the introduction is what is the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita? Why did the Supreme Lord speak it? And the definition of purpose means the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So on page 6, Srila Prabhupada explains that to bring relief of the material miseries. If we see, this was the condition that Arjuna, who was hearing the Bhagavad Gita, was in. He was in anxiety, stress, fear, sweating, scared, chest pains, phobia. Anybody ever have any of these symptoms? We all do, in varying degrees. Anybody wants freedom from them? Anybody would love a guarantee that these would never come back? That is what brings us to the position of peace and happiness. So Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, who is in this position. We'll see at the end of the first chapter and into the beginning of the second chapter that he was in a very distressed condition. And then he goes to Krishna and he says, now please help me overcome these. And so every single instruction that's contained within this Bhagavad Gita is for one purpose. One purpose only. And that is to bring peace and happiness to Arjuna. Why? Because Arjuna is his very dear friend. So what is our position now? Well, actually, Arjuna was not in distress, fear, anxiety. He was playing a role. A role in Krishna's drama. Why? Because the Lord really wanted to speak to all of us. So Arjuna took on this position so that the Lord would be able to speak these very potent instructions of the Bhagavad Gita that are ultimately intended for all of the Lord's children. Who are the Lord's children? All of us. We are His part and parcel. And because He is so compassionate, He knew there would be times, maybe more than less, living in this material world where we would be overcome by this fear and anxiety and distress. And so to help find a very tangible, direct experience to overcome them, He spoke this Bhagavad Gita. So this is the purpose. To help each and every living entity overcome the miseries of the material world and to find this peace and happiness.
Are you saying Arjuna wasn't really in distress with his family's fighting?
Yeah, he had full clarity, and we're going to see how he becomes confused by the Lord's arrangement. But ultimately, he was a pure soul who was not in distress. But he temporarily, it's a little bit technical, it's by the influence of Maya. It's called the illusory energy. He comes into this position. So, and we'll see very tangibly what contributes to these emotions. We're not just going to speak about them, but what contributes to our fear, to our anxiety, to our stress. And then, very precisely, how to break each and every one of them down. So that is the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. That is the second topic that Prabhupada presents in the introduction. The third section of the introduction discusses the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita. There are 5 main topics. The first is Lord Sri Krishna. And in the very beginning of the introduction, Srila Prabhupada establishes who is Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And throughout the Bhagavad Gita, that is established, as well as throughout all the scriptures, and there's many quotes and evidences we won't get into immediately, but we will, particularly in the beginning of the second chapter. But so the first topic is speaking about Ishvara, the controller, the supreme controller. And that is Lord. And the second topic is Jiva. Who is Jiva? And who is that? Us. We are all spirit soul. So we're going to understand there is a distinction between us as spirit soul and the supreme spirit. And we talked a couple weeks ago about that eternal relationship, that Sanatana Dharma. There's an eternal relationship between Jiva and Krishna. So the Bhagavad Gita is going to speak on that. It's going to speak on the material nature. What is this material world? What is this mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance? This Rajogun, Tamogun, Sattvagun. Okay? It's going to speak on karma. This laws of action. Why is all these things happening? Why are good things happening? Why are bad things happening? So Krishna will explain the laws of karma. And finally, he's going to explain this factor of time. In the material world, we see one thing. Everything is temporary. Everything is temporary. Have we found anything eternal?
Taxes?
Yeah, death and taxes. Those are the only eternal truths.
I'm sorry.
It's true. It's true. But everything is temporary. Why? Because the factor of time. Time, as we'll see, is the Lord's all-devouring force. It's the ultimate subduing energy. As soon as you build some great building, it slowly begins to deteriorate. As soon as anything comes up, eventually time will bring it to an end. So these 5 topics are very important. When one understands these 5 topics with great clarity, anything we face in our day-to-day life will become very clear. We'll know why, we'll know how to respond, and how to find success through it. If we understand these 5 things. So in the seminar, over the 7 weeks that we had the seminar, we covered all 5 of these topics also. And now the Lord is going to speak about them in more detail. Okay. The 4th thing that Srila Prabhupada speaks about is how to obtain this knowledge. So I said that Krishna is speaking to Arjuna to bring him freedom from those difficult situations. But really he is speaking to all of us. So how to obtain this knowledge? Arjuna, who's seated here in the chariot, we can think, well, he had the benefit. The Lord was speaking directly to him. How are we to obtain this same message? Did somebody record it on Facebook? Do we have it on YouTube? Where is that message? Well, the Lord says, in the beginning of the 4th chapter, the 4th chapter is entitled Transcendental Knowledge. He says, Evam parampara prapte mimam rajarsya viduhu sakala neha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. Excuse me. He says this knowledge is meant to come in parampara. It is descending knowledge. What does descending knowledge means? It means it comes from the supreme source. And from there it is passed on through parampara. That means from guru to disciple, guru to disciple. And what is parampara? That is page 30 of this introduction. Told you we'd come back to it. This is the direct link from Srila Prabhupada's presentation of Bhagavad Gita all the way back to who's number 1 on the list? Because who can know everything about the creation? The Creator. One who was there at the time of... Only they can know independently, meaning they are not dependent on someone else telling them. After that, everyone knows by hearing from someone who knows. How does parampara work? I gave this example in the seminar. But if you want to know what I ate for breakfast today, do any of you know? Can any of you know for certain what I ate for breakfast today? Yes?
Yeah, whatever we prepare, we have it. So.
No, what I ate.
Oh, sorry.
What I ate. Any of you can know?
No.
If I told you what I ate every day for the last 10 years, would you still know definitively what I ate today?
No.
Because none of you were there at the time of me having my breakfast today. Right? So if you want to know, you have to hear from someone who was there. So if I tell you what I ate for breakfast today, and then you tell him, and pass along, you tell her, and it comes all in. By the time it comes to you, will you know what I ate for breakfast today?
Yeah, we will know, but may not be the same. It may differ.
Ooh. So you will know if the message has been passed down without any change, without any adulteration, without adding of anyone's opinion or thinks or thoughts. Right? If no other flavor is added, you will get it intact. So this is parampara, that the message is passed down from Krishna. And the guru is the postman who delivers the message, does not write the message, but simply delivers. How? As it is, without any adaptation, without any change. And what is the guarantee? The Lord says, when this chain, if it ever breaks, what happens? He says, I come. I come millennium after millennium. Dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I'll come and reestablish it so that this message can be passed down. So this Bhagavad Gita must be heard through disciplic session. Our own analysis, our own understanding will not lead to any factual conclusions that we can draw. And that takes a little bit of humility. Right? Because we always want, I want my own. But it cannot be known. You may not want to hear what I ate for breakfast. You may want to figure out yourself. The problem is, you may be right, but you might be wrong. And when it comes to something as inconsequential as what I ate for breakfast, there's no harm. But when it comes to the consequential fact of how I'm going to shape my life, do we want to be maybe right with our conclusions? No. So thus, we must come to the source, and the same knowledge, the same potency that Arjuna had, hearing directly from Krishna this Bhagavad Gita, we have by studying this. The Lord says there is no difference. We may perceive a difference, but there is no difference from Arjuna hearing this, from us reading this. There is no difference. As long as the message is passed intact. And so what's the result? What is the result of studying this Bhagavad Gita? All that we have been aspiring for. This peace, this happiness, this love. This is the result. You're not going to be able to float in the air, perform some magic, pull a mango out of the air. No, sorry. If that is your goal, it's not here. These mystic siddhis, yeah, they're available through some other processes. But the Bhagavad Gita is going to show us very tangibly how to bring about this peace, love, and happiness. That is the tangible goal. And how does it unfold? It unfolds from understanding who I am as spirit soul and what my relationship is with the Supreme Lord. Friends, that is the only means to unlock eternal peace and happiness. Yeah, we may get some temporary enjoyment from all other aspects of life. But we know with that temporary comes frustration because it ends. And then the misery, the anxiety, the stress, the fear. But where to find this eternal peace and happiness? It exists in one place. And that is my relationship with the Lord. And thus Prabhupada speaks about in his introduction, Sanatana Dharma. And he makes a comment that it is not religion. Religion is not an exact translation for Sanatana Dharma. Religion implies a faith in certain things. Faith can change. I have faith in this process, and now I have faith in that process. But what is Sanatana Dharma is the eternal activity. My faith may shift, but my eternal nature of who I am and my relationship with the Lord, that never changes. And that relationship of I am loving servant to the Supreme Lord, that is the Sanatana Dharma, meaning the eternal activity. as soon as I go back to that eternal activity, I begin to find this peace and happiness and love. Just like that fish. The fish's eternal nature is to be in water. As soon as I pull it out of water, it's not happy. The eternal nature of our soul is to be in relationship with the Lord. And so the Bhagavad Gita is going to speak to us about how to understand that and how to find it. Right? So the final section of the introduction, Srila Prabhupada speaks about what does this all mean at the end? What is the practical implication? And he sums it up into a very simple synthesis. Simple in concept, putting in practicality will take us some time to understand. But the ultimate goal of our spiritual process is not to memorize every verse, to be able to recite them in Sanskrit, to be able to wear a perfect tilak. No. The ultimate goal is to awaken the love for the Lord in the heart and to always be in thinking of Him. There's a verse that says, Smartavavya satatam vishnor vishmartavya najatuti sarva vide nishedyashor etayor eva kinkaraha. It says all of the rules and regulations, all of the injunctions carried within the scriptures, they are servants of two principles. One, we should never forget the Lord. And two, we should always remember Him. Everything sums up into that. Always remember the Lord and never forget Him. That is the goal and purpose of every injunction within the scriptures. So the practical solution the Bhagavad Gita is going to guide us to is how to manmana bhavan mad bhakto. That is the summary verse of this Bhagavad Gita. The essential treasure within this whole Bhagavad Gita is summarized in two verses. One of them is repeated twice. One's at the end of the 9th chapter, and one towards the end of the 18th chapter. Now Krishna says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto majjaji mam namaskuru. He says, you do these 4 things. You think of me, become your devotee, become my devotee, offer your homages to me, offer your pranams to me. For whose benefit? It may seem, well, that's nice of the Lord to say, He'll enjoy. The Lord only has one goal in speaking every verse of this Bhagavad Gita. And that is to bring relief from all of the difficult situations. And the second, he says, second key verse, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishmami mahasuchaha. He says, you forget everything else and just surrender unto me. I will take care of all of your past sinful reactions. Don't fear. That's it. So our study, maybe over the coming years, is going to bring us to these 2 essential principles. So this is the practical solution. Just remembering the Lord in our life. And it sounds easy. Maybe it sounds difficult. But we'll see how to tangibly do that. And that's not going to mean that, okay, no more going to the office, I'm going to bang on a mridanga and sing bhajans all day. That would be nice, but it's not practical. Not practical, at least for all of us. So we're going to see, because Arjuna is going to want to flee the battlefield and go to the forest and be a renunciate. And Arjuna says no, Krishna says no. You stay, you do your duty. You have a family, you have a job, you have responsibilities. Others are depending upon you. You must do your duty. So we're going to see how to do our duty while remembering the Lord. Okay? So now we're going to enter the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The first chapter is entitled Observing the Armies. So anyone know who's this on the right hand side? And here? Sanjaya. So we'll just read the first verse as an auspicious beginning to our verse. So, Dhritarashtra uvacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yudsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kema kurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? So I won't go into the whole background story of the Mahabharata. That would take too much time. But Sanjaya is the father of the Kauravas, who's on one side of the battlefield. Dhritarashtra. I said Sanjaya. Thank you. So you're making sure you're paying attention. Dhritarashtra is the father of the Kauravas. Duryodhana and 100 sons, and those who chose to take side of that battle. And on the other side are the sons of Pandu, his brother. So now immediately we see there is family conflict. Cousins are about to engage in a battle. Right? So, what led to this battle? Well, what led to this battle is a lot of drama and intrigue. And in short, the kingdom that was rightfully the possession of the Pandavas, the sons of Dhritarashtra's brother, was taken away and given to the sons of Dhritarashtra. And there were many atrocities performed. There were the sons of Pandu were tried to kill in so many ways. They were cheated in a gambling match, and so many different things came up. And all of this battle for who would take possession of the kingdom culminates in the assembly at this place of Kurukshetra. And actually the Lord scripted this entire drama, which has so much depth to it. We cannot even do it any justice today. But He brought it all for up to the point to bring us to hear this Bhagavad Gita. Because what was the climax of this story? This battle that was about to be ensued. For decades, this battle was brewing. This conflict between the sons of Pandu and the sons of Dhritarashtra. Between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas were righteous, the Kauravas were not. And there was this conflict. And it boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled to the point where they had assembled in the battlefield. And assembled in the battlefield, and moments before the first arrows were about to be launched, millions of soldiers had gathered at Kurukshetra. Millions of soldiers. Just moments before all of this was about to ensue, Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. Why? Why He wrote the script in this way? To show to us that at the most critical times of our life, what could be more critical time in the life of Arjuna, Yudhishthira Maharaj, Bhim, even Duryodhana and others? What is the most critical time of their life? This battle that was about to begin. And that is the time in which Arjuna began to hear the Bhagavad Gita. Not when he was old and had settled all the other things in his life, had figured out everything. No, at the most critical juncture of his life. And that is why the Lord created this whole drama to boil up, to bring our attention to this dialogue that will take place on this battlefield, in the middle of the battlefield. And Dhritarashtra here is asking, because he is blind, to Sanjaya, what happened? What happened? I want to know. They had assembled, he knew that, and now what happened? And that is where the Bhagavad Gita begins. And so, in the beginning, the first several verses, we see this dialogue of Duryodhana. Duryodhana is assessing his side of the army against the Pandavas, and he plays various political games. And then, in the mid part of the first chapter, Arjuna now speaks to Krishna. And Arjuna presents 5 reasons why he should not fight this battle. Many of us have this question. Why was there so much blood shed in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? If he was so loving and compassionate, why he could not reconcile the differences and bring about a loving exchange within this? Right? We sometimes have that question, that doubt. So Arjuna presents 5 reasons, and these are very important reasons for us to understand. He first says, Krishna, I should not fight because it is compassionate to forgive. I don't really want the kingdom anyways. Let them have it. Yes, they have stolen from me. Yes, they tried to kill me. Yes, they tried to poison me. Yes, they abducted my wife. Yes, they did so many things, but I'm willing to forgive. That's what a compassionate taking the higher ground. Sounds very logical. I should forgive. The second reason he says, if I fight this battle, now Arjuna was the most powerful warrior in the universe. There was no doubt he was going to win, ultimately because the Supreme Lord was on his side. But he said, if I win this battle, all my family, half my family, even my guru, my grandfather on the other side, they'll all be dead. Who am I going to enjoy this kingdom with anyways? So what happiness will I get by enjoying a kingdom that came at the cost of so much blood? Another very logical question. Reason he should not fight. Third, he says it is sinful to kill. You're asking me to kill my grandfather, my guru. There is no greater sin within the scriptures than such. Why are you asking me to perform an activity that will bring about suffering? Because we know bad action equals bad reactions. So why, if you're my friend, would you encourage me to do this? He says. Fourth, he says everyone has gathered in this battlefield, meaning all the leaders of society, all the different people keeping peace and have established the rules and the laws. If everyone perishes in this battle, what will happen to society? It will degrade. This Varna Sankara will develop, and the population will fall into ruination. Why? You're saying Krishna is very clear what I should do, but he says, I don't want to fight because I am confused. I don't know what to do. Anybody ever have an indecision on what they're supposed to do? These dilemmas? How am I supposed to deal with this? So, Arjuna makes a pretty compelling case for why he should not fight. He put forth great logic. All that he'd learned through his very righteous upbringing. All that he had understood. Now, what was the result of his analysis and conclusion? Did he find peace and happiness? Did he find clarity? He did not. How do we know? Because after making this whole series of statements, what does he do? He sits down in a chariot and he says, I can find no way to dispel this great grief and anxiety that has overcome me. And then what does he do? He says, I now surrender to you, Krishna. You tell me what it is that I should do. And the point is, he tried to solve his own problems. He tried to figure it out. But ultimately, he was unsuccessful. He couldn't solve his own problems. His logic was very sound. And we're going to see in the coming weeks how Krishna answers each and every one of these 5 positions. And we're going to see how it's actually the exact opposite of what Arjuna should do. Krishna is going to say, it's actually going, if you want compassion, you should fight. If you want to find peace and happiness, you must fight. If you want to avoid sin, you must fight. If you don't want to have society degrade, you must fight. And it'll become very, very clear. And this is what we see in our day-to-day life. Sometimes we think we are making the best decisions for ourselves. But in reality, when we take the guidance from the Supreme Lord, we'll see, wow, I was headed down the opposite path. And there's one fundamental flaw in all of Arjuna's positions. Of course, Arjuna, as I said, is a pure devotee. He was put into this position. And what was the one fundamental flaw in his logic? Some of you have heard from him previously, no?
Is he considering that he is a body, not a spirit soul?
Yes. He was looking at the situation of this battle from the perspective of I am this body, forgetting he was spirit soul. From the body perspective, this logic may hold. But when Krishna begins to say, Dehinoshmin yatha dehe kamadam yavanam jara, tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. You are spirit soul. Now look at this situation from the perspective of I am spirit soul. When you do, actually all of your conclusions, you'll see, are complete opposite. And ultimately the Bhagavad Gita is going to teach us that. Which is, everything that we see when we are, I am this body, is opposite. Upside down. Everything is upside down. So we are going to put on the lenses of I am spirit soul. And everything that we encounter, when we see it through that perspective, how to find perfection. So this is in very short form, the first 60 or so pages of the Bhagavad Gita. And now we'll begin, starting in 2 weeks, to discuss the specific mood in which Arjuna said, I'm not able to dispel my own things. Now, Lord, you speak to me, and we'll hear the Lord's first instruction. And that is in the beginning of chapter 2. Okay? So this is the overview of the introduction, the 6 parts Srila Prabhupada has presented in the introduction, and the foundation of the first chapter, Observing the Armies. And if you wish, I encourage you can read chapter 1. It's nice. There's some interesting dialogue, and the purports walk us through what's happening, and you'll see these different parts. And we'll come back and begin discussing chapter 2. Okay? Any comments or questions? Yes?
I have a question. At the beginning, when you said how it gets translated down, and if it is a flaw, then Krishna comes to correct it. So, has it happened over the years where he's came to correct it?
Yeah, many times. And we have our parampara right now is in full tact. There's a traceable lineage back. There are 4 bona fide paramparas, meaning 4 paths, if you will, coming from the ultimate source. Any 4 of paths are available to all of us to take. So we'll be speaking, from the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, which is presented within one of these 4 paths. It's called the Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. It's a mouthful, but that's the description. So there are 4 fully intact paths that are bringing the full essence without any misinterpretation. But anytime we're going to hear from some spiritual source, we must be able to trace it back to the source. Otherwise, it's someone's ideas. And someone's ideas may be right, and they may be wrong. Okay? Any other comments or question? You have a question?
Can you do the previous slide?
Huh?
I think I'm.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
You said, Krishna said to Arjuna that he should think that it's the spirit soul and then he should fight the war. Same thing if we think, we can do anything, right?
Nope.
And that's what it meant.
Nope. It's a great point. I'm glad you made that. Because when we understand we're spirit soul, we have to perform our actions based not on our own whims, but based on the instructions of our higher authorities. So just because I'm spirit soul doesn't give me an undisputed license to, I can slash this body. It's just a body. It's temporary anyways. No, that is a sin. So the Lord is going to explain that in doing your duty, sometimes you must perform certain actions. Srila Prabhupada will give the example of a judge. Sometimes a judge has to authorize punishment to somebody. Sometimes a judge authorizes great rewards to somebody. But they are not doing based on their own whims, based on who they like, who they not like. Based on their own. They are doing based on the laws of the land and the activities of the individual. So similarly, he's going to tell Arjuna, you have a duty because your duty is as a protector. He's a Kshatriya. So he has a specific prescribed duty. And that duty is to protect society. Not to protect his ego. Not to protect his own fame. His duty is to protect society. And the Kauravas have performed 6 types of aggressive activities. And in the Manu Samhita, it's explained that anytime any one of these 6 types of aggressive activities are taken by somebody, that person must be punished. And it is the duty of the Kshatriya to do so. And to not do your duty is a sinful activity. So it is not a free license just because I'm spirit soul. And again, we're going to go into a lot of detail on this in the 2nd chapter. It's not a free license. But according to the injunctions, one sometimes has to perform that activity. And we're going to see how it is ultimately compassionate to also the recipient. Why? Because we're going to see the future suffering of Duryodhana and all the Kauravas is so extensive because of their past actions. But because they will leave their body in the presence of the Lord, they have the opportunity for liberation. So Arjuna thought it was compassionate to not fight. But Krishna is going to say, if you want to be compassionate, you should fight because you are opening the doors to heaven for all of them. Now we get into an argument with our neighbor and we can say, I'm opening the doors to heaven with them, and bop, No, doesn't work that way. Right? That is working on our own whim, not working on the instructions of. So everything that we have to do is also given in scripture. The Manu Samhita is a guideline of how to deal with every action. So it's not a free license. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's sometimes we can see when Krishna begins to speak about the eternal nature of the soul, it could lead one to say, then who cares about the body? One must care for the body, not only our own, but for all of the living entities. It's okay? Any other comment?
So probably this whole drama of this Mahabharata is again created for us to tell the message of Bhagavad Gita, or because again this is created by Krishna only. Is it so? Is it right?
That's the ultimate reason. Of course, there are many other instructions and learnings that take place throughout the Mahabharata. But the essence, the ultimate purpose was to bring attention to all mankind, all humankind, to this Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because it is Krishna's key for all of us to unlock this peace and happiness. He wants to see everyone find this. So he scripted this huge drama to bring us to these 700 verses. How many verses are in the Mahabharata? Huh? No, in the Mahabharata.
124,000.
Over 100,000 verses. 700 contain everything, the essence of all Vedic knowledge. Yeah.
You were mentioning of the Sanatana Dharma. Can you brief more on this?
Yeah, thank you. That is Sanatana Dharma is a very deep topic. Prabhupada spends several pages in the introduction explaining Sanatana Dharma. So Sanatana means eternal. Dharma doesn't have a great translation in English, but an approximate translation is occupation or activity. So what is our eternal occupation or eternal activity? Right? Like my occupation today may be businessman or scientist or doctor or engineer. But 100 years from now, what am I don't know. These are temporary activities. I may be a father today, maybe a mother next life. I may be a younger brother today and an older brother. Like, who knows, right? That's always changing. But what is the eternal Sanatana Dharma? I am a child of the Supreme Lord, and I have a loving servant relationship with Him. That is a fact that never changes. It is not relative to time, place, or circumstance. Whether it's raining, snowing, or sunny. Whether I'm tall or short. Whether I'm male or female. Human or dog. Doesn't matter. That is a Sanatan, eternal activity. And so the whole Bhagavad Gita is to bring to light this eternal activity. All of this really sums up into three things. Who am I? Who is God? And what is my relationship? That's it. Three things. Who am I? Who is God? And what is my relationship? And that's Sanatana Dharma. And it is universal. That's why this is not a sectarian belief. This is not it is an eternal nature. Because I may be in this color body today, but I may be in a different color tomorrow. Who knows? These are all temporary designations. Male, female, tall, short, rich, poor. Doesn't matter. The soul has this eternal, unchanging activity. And unlocking that, understanding what that is what gives us peace and happiness. Because until then, we'll be frustrated. Why? Because we're not in our natural environment. Like that fish. Until it's in its natural environment, you won't find it. So that's Sanatana Dharma. It is not my today's dharma. What's my duty today? That is not Sanatana dharma, right? I may have acquired certain qualities that lead to certain occupations, certain interests, right? But that is just a function today. But in my next life or prior life, I may have had a slightly different nature, right? So that is not Sanatana. But my eternal nature is one. And the eternal nature of all, not just some, everyone, has this universal. And that is why this is a universal. Why 70 languages? Because it has universal appeal. Yes. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Why Krishna is on the Pandava side, not on the...
Why Krishna is on the Pandava side and why not on the Kaurava side? Well, Krishna gave the choice. He is impartial. He says, I am impartial to all. I envy no one. So he gave the choice to Duryodhana and Pandava. He said, one of you can have my army and one of you can have me. So what did Duryodhana pick? He thought one Krishna or Krishna's powerful army. It's easy. He won the flip of the coin to pick first. Not really. But
again, it was like, I think Duryodhana was sitting close to his head. So there it's, I don't know whether it's right or wrong.
He had the first choice. And Arjuna picked Krishna. And we'll see, one is never defeated when the Lord is on our side. Arjuna and his army was outnumbered drastically in terms of, but they had one supreme person on their side that ensured victory. And it's very instructive to us that when we are with the Lord, nothing can conquer us. How to become fearless? A child walking down a dark alley, a 5-year-old child, has no fear. Why? Because he's holding on to the hand of his father. It's no fear. When we walk down life holding the hand of the Supreme Lord, which is extended for each and every one of us to grab,
I have two questions. One is on the page 30. We know that Mahabharata was written by Vyasa, but again here it is mentioned in number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So from Krishna to
Vyasa, just remember, he documented it.
oh,
It was passed down previously through oral submission.
okay.
But Vyasadeva, being the literary incarnation of Krishna, because things used to be such that when we heard it once, we memorized it. If I move off this side, anybody can remember the 5 reasons Arjuna chose not to fight? It's very difficult. Our memories are very faint. But back those days, one would hear and have full understanding. But 5,000 years ago, Srila Vyasadeva, seeing the degradation of our, he put to writing. But he was not the, what we can say, author. He simply put to writing what was being spoken previously. That's all. It's okay? You had a question?
Yeah, actually, at the beginning, you were mentioning about how we should read Gita, and from my personal experience, I have realized like when I read Gita, it's very kind of hard to really get the essence of it and to really feel that this is kind of being spoken by Lord itself. Also, regarding devotion, so I understand that by having devotion and then reading it, it will have a different effect. So would you like to maybe elaborate a little on that?
How to develop that mood of devotion. Yeah, thank you. It's a very nice question. So we'll see Arjuna's mood in the beginning of the second chapter. And the first mood is this: I can't help myself. I've tried. I've tried. I've tried year after year, life after life, millennium after millennium. I've tried. Now, Lord, you please help me. I am your surrendered disciple, he says. So our mood in approaching the Bhagavad Gita should be as such. My Lord, help me. Help me find that which you wish upon all of us, this peace and happiness. Until then, so Arjuna is going to lay out exactly the mood we should follow. So we have a role model, exactly how, just like, if we had an elder mentor, right? They showed us how to be a student in school, how to take notes, how to be studious, how to follow, how to write exams. They showed the way for us. Arjuna is like that for us. So, and ultimately this mood of devotion comes when we have this desire to awaken this relationship with the Lord. And we approach this Bhagavad Gita to maybe develop conviction. We may not have conviction today that I am part and parcel of Krishna. I may not have conviction that I am his eternal servant. I may not have conviction that this is the key to peace and happiness. That's fair. That is a fair doubt. But the mood be, let me approach this Bhagavad Gita to understand how it is so. Versus, let me approach this to find why Krishna is wrong. You can try. You won't get anything out of it. And the reason we study this Bhagavad Gita together, I thought that's the path you're heading down, but you went to a different place, is when reading this Bhagavad Gita together, we're going to discuss some of the inner meanings and the detail and the practical applications by sharing our experiences together. And that realization will give us a much deeper understanding. Yeah, we can read it on our own, and we should try. Even if we're not understanding it, just keep going. And I can assure you, each time you read this Bhagavad Gita, you're going to get more out of it. There are people who have read this 300, 400, 500 times. Why you would read it the 498th time? Only if you're getting something more out of it than the 497th time. Right? Otherwise, why would you continue? Trust me, every time you read this, you'll get a deeper realization. It's a dynamic book. It reveals itself to you. And immediately, come on. It's not, I know it. I know those emotions are there. Just try it. If I bring a piece of cake in front of you and tell you it's sweet, you're going to say, come on. No, why? Because you've eaten it before, you know it's sweet. When will you know these statements are fact? When you've tasted the nectar of the Bhagavad Gita for yourself. As you read it, I guarantee you read every day, one thing will happen to you. You'll read a purport and you're like, I was just having this concern or this question and it's answered in this purport. How did that happen? And you'll think that's a coincidence. And then it'll happen 4 or 5 days later. And then again, and again. And eventually we'll realize it's not a coincidence. It is the divine arrangement of the Lord. But how to know? Until we try it. Just like that piece of cake. I can tell you there's sugar and butter in there. But until you won't know.
What's a pure port?
Purport? Oh, sorry, thank you. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada is given, again, the Sanskrit, the translation, the sentence, and then he says a purport, and that's an explanation. It's an explanation of the verse in detail. And this is where in the purport he's drawing from a lot of the other commentaries, primarily from Srila Baladev Vidubhashana and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, these two great acharyas who have written extensive commentaries, as well as commentaries from various other scriptures. And so he's explaining the verse. And that's what we'll be reading, and from that purport we'll be discussing.
if you see this chariot, like, can you tell me the significance of Hanumanji sitting on top of the chariot?
There are several signs of victory on the side of the Pandavas, and one of them is Lord Hanuman's flag sitting atop the chariot of Arjuna. And that is because of his relationship with who within the Mahabharata, who?
Krishna.
Bhim. There's a pastime of Lord of Bhim who had gone to the Himalayas. You heard this pastime? And Hanuman's tail was across the walking path. And so Bhim said, "Monkey, move your tail. I'm going." Now Bhim I am old. I cannot move my tail. And Bhim said, "Move your tail." "I cannot." And the monkey said, "You move it. It's just a tail. How hard is it to move?" So this great, powerful Bhim goes. He couldn't move it even a millimeter. And then this dialogue ensues, and the relationship between Hanuman and Bhim. And Hanumanji says that, "I will accompany you on the battlefield in the form of my Vani." So when Bhim was roaring on the battlefield, Hanumanji was adding his roar to Bhimsen's roar, and thus was empowering. So he took that position on the chariot of Arjuna. Any other questions?
Talking about Krishna and Ram. Talking about Krishna and Ram, is there any connection between them, or they are two different identities?
So the connection between Krishna and Ram. So, Lord Ram is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And there are many, many incarnations of the Supreme Lord. And they are all equally potent, meaning they are equally powerful. But in each, what we call plenary incarnation, this is a technical word, they show or present certain features, certain potencies. So as Lord Ram, he shows this, very righteous way of living. In Matsya Avatar, he shows a very, specific pastime, Kurma, Nrsingadev in this way. So there are millions and millions and millions of incarnations of the Supreme Lord. But of all the incarnations, there's one source. And this is explained in the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. And the one source is Krishna. Krishnastu Swayam Bhagavan. Of all of the avatars, there's one source. And the example is given in the scriptures like, if I have 50 candles, and I light all the 50 candles, they all burn with the same power and potency if they're the same candle. Right? But still, there was one source of that light for all of them. So like that, they are all equally potent. They're all the same person in a different mood or exhibition. But of all of that, there has to be an ultimate source. And that ultimate source is the Lord. And that's why he'll say in the Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada gives all of this in the beginning of the purport of introduction. He'll say, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante bham. That I am the source of everything. And Arjuna will say, Lord Brahma has said, Ishvara Parama Krishna. And so there's all the scriptural evidence. But that's the relationship between the two.
Okay.
Yeah? And one can be a devotee of Lord Ram, Krishna. No difference.
No difference. Yeah. That was another thing.
Meaning there's a difference in feature, but it's a perfectly bona fide, there's a realm of Lord Ram in the spiritual world. So Shall we do some more chanting?